If you're a sports fan of a certain age, you will have memories of late nights spent next to the radio, tuned into what this man had to say. For 3 decades, Dan Russell provided appointment listening, opening the phone lines to the likes of The Pauser and Ranger Smith, not to mention his famous feud with Vancouver Canucks executive Brian Burke. Now he's finally committing that story to paper in Pleasant Good Evening, a memoir, My 30 Wild and Turbulent Years of Sports Talk. Dan, like many kids, your dream was to call the games as they were happening, not to talk about them after they were over. Yet you made a career out of it. How did that happen?
Well, quite by accident. Certainly, that was not the plan for me to be doing post game activity. Why? Because there was nothing of that sort when I was growing up. When I grew up and listened to the Canucks games, the game started with a pregame show that lasted 15 minutes. I think they're all day now, and a quick post-game show, and then it was on to regular programming. So nobody really had any knowledge that there was something more that could be done. What really triggered me was by 1982, when the Canucks made their first run to the Stanley Cup final. There was a couple of really exciting moments, especially in round 3 against Chicago. And I remember, yes, I was already just partially into the media by that point, but I wasn't on the road or anything. And I watched those games on TV, and I got into my car so excited after they beat Chicago one game, and then Roger Nielsen was lifting the white towel in the next game, and there was nothing. There was nothing on the radio. And I thought, I can't be the only one that is craving more discussion. A couple of years later, Sports Talk began. So I think the impetus was really that 82 series. And it's just that I really wanted to call the games, and even doing Sports Talk was a way to get more airtime. I wasn't thinking it was a 30-year run. I was just thinking, get me on the radio, get me some more on-air hours so I can, start polishing my skills and hopefully one day have a chance to call games.
So today we have an all sports radio station. We used to have two. We have podcasts like Donnie and Dolly, not to mention Canucks Twitter. Do you feel in any way responsible for all of that?
No, I can't say that I feel responsible for it. I certainly know that we were trailblazers and nobody had done what we were doing before that. But, the rest of North America sort of caught up with that too. I mean, when I started, there had been one other talk show in Canada, in Edmonton, and a French-speaking one in Montreal. But those shows went by the wayside, and there we were as the only ones. But, I think eventually it was always going to happen, just as, all the North American stations. When we started, there was no TSN, there was no Sportsnet. ESPN might have been happening in the States, but it was very embryonic. So I think that we just kind of were there, but not necessarily the ones that made it all happen.
Now, Sports Talk lasted 30 years across 5 different radio stations: CJOR, CKWX, CFMI, CKNW, and Sea Isle. But it all started in the basement of the Grosvenor Hotel at CJOR. From those humble beginnings, did you have any idea of what you were embarking upon at the time?
Well, actually, CJOR was my first station. I was at BCIT, so I was a part-time board operator, and what an experience. I mean, the legendary talk show hosts like Pat Burns and Terry Moore and Rafe Mayer was there, and my mentor Al Jordan was in production. I was part-time. I operated all the talk shows: Disco Saturday Night, Whitecap Soccer. That was from the bottom of the Grosvenor Hotel at 840 Howe Street. Eventually, those studios, not too long after I started, moved to 8th and Hemlock, not far from where you are right now. And that's where Sports Talk actually began, was 8th and Hemlock. We were not at the bottom of the Grosvenor Hotel, but I sure knew it intimately.
Now, one of your broadcast heroes, Jim Robson, had a long association with CKWX. Once CJOR changed formats and call letters in 1988, you too would have a brief association with WX. What happened there?
Well, it was really a fantastic time for me, to be honest. I mean, it wasn't great that 65 or so people lost their jobs in that August of 1988 purge that CJOR had. And they switched formats, switched call letters. I was the last voice ever on that iconic CJOR airwaves. So that was weird. But then within a day or two, I had 4 job offers, and it really came down to either CKNW at that time or CKWX. And Greg Douglas and Tom Peacock and Ted Farr, they all really courted me nicely and told me I could have my same time slot. They wanted it. They were starting a network around British Columbia. That was exciting. It was called the Satellite Radio Network. And even to my surprise, because the hockey rights were on CKNW, I turned down CKNW and went to CKWX. So it was good. The only problem was a couple things. CKNW just kept coming after me, which was a nice problem to have. But, to me, I felt if I kept saying no to them, that they would eventually give up on me. And at the same time, for whatever reason, CKWX did not really enter into contract talks at that time to extend my 1-year deal. So I jumped, and at that point, CKNW was certainly not able to give me what I wanted in terms of 10 to midnight on their AM station, but they came up with a real unique idea for the time. It wouldn't sound like today it was really out of the ordinary, but it really was back in 1989 to have a regular 5-night-a-week talk show on the FM dial. So that's how I ended up going from CKWX to CFMI, or Rock 101 CFMI. And I spent a lot of years there at CFMI, and they were happy years.